I think this is a really interesting topic because I can't remember ever having done a webinar quite like this before, or certainly covering a topic quite like this before, where right up to minutes before kicking off the webinar, I'm still refreshing the news pages of a number of popular news outlets to see if anything has fundamentally changed about what we know about the topic at the moment. And I think that's sort of indicative of what we can probably expect in this area for probably the next couple of years. But what that means in terms of a lesson for us as people working in business, I think, and this is an important point that I want to try and get across in the session, is that the things we can do around Brexit and preparing our organisations for Brexit are applicable widely across everything we do. It's all about being ready for change, or unexpected change, or unknown change, certainly making the organisation ready to deal with uncertainty and the level of uncertainty that we're seeing today. My name's Craig Willis. I'm one of the founders at Skore, and I'm really a business change and transformation consultant, so helping organisations deliver change and transformation right first time. We use Skore as the platform to rapidly discover how an organisation works, analyse it, and provide insights to the programme team or the business in order to make decisions about how to move forward. So I'd like to just introduce Mark Pearce from Pearce Consulting.
Yes, thanks, Craig. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mark Pearce. My background is I'm a civil engineer and have worked in the construction industry all my life with contractors such as Taylor Wimpey, Cementation, Balfour Beatty. And for a number of years, I was the director of Cyril Suites on the project management side, doing projects in the UK and abroad. And for the last 15 years, I've run my own consultancy, which has been specialising in helping contractors and consultants in the construction sector, improving efficiency and performance through looking at their business processes. And we've used tools like Skore to help do that.
Thank you very much, Mark. We sent out this survey last month. It was a very simple survey, and we asked you these three simple questions. Is your business impacted by EU rules and regulations? Does your business import from or export to the EU? And then finally, does your business rely on workforce from the EU? And as you can see from the results, that over 60% of businesses expect some sort of impact from leaving the EU. In most cases, businesses that we've spoken to are expecting the rules and regulations to remain pretty much aligned, at least for the transition period, and probably for some time after that. There will be some loosening of some rules and perhaps some tightening of others. The actions or plans that people were putting in place to mitigate the effects of Brexit, or potentially take advantage of the opportunities, seem to depend on the size of the business. Larger organisations had teams and plans in place, some of which were very advanced, while some of the smaller organisations we talked to had actually done very, very little or nothing at all. And so there's a real broad range of preparedness, if you like, across British industries in terms of how we're going to deal with Brexit. It'd be interesting now to talk a little bit about what that means in the construction industry. And so what I'd like to do now is hand over to Mark. Mark, and if you could give us some insights from the industry and the impact of these areas we've talked about.
Yeah, thanks, Craig. Going to look at these three key areas that we've identified. And those are the rules and regulations, import and export, and the workforce. And if we deal with the rules and regulations, I've broken those down into really two areas. One is health and safety, and the other is design standards, design codes. And On the health and safety issues, the majority of UK health and safety regulations introduced over the last 30 years originated from the European Union. So with Britain now preparing to leave the EU, it begs the question, what happens next to health and safety laws governing the UK construction industry? And what impact will this have? Well, if we look at the cornerstone of UK health and legislation is the Health and Safety at Work Act. This act, which is goal setting rather than prescriptive, was derived wholly from the UK, and as such is probably not likely to change very much. However, the secondary legislation around health and safety, such as CDM 2015, has been derived from EU directives. But on the basis of what's already been said, it's quite likely a lot of that will be imported into UK legislation as part of the Great Repeal Bill, which the government are planning to introduce to, at a stroke, import legislation around all sorts of areas directly into UK law, so that we can carry on almost as normal. And then I think over time there may well be people looking at that legislation to see whether it's now applicable to us as a standalone country as opposed to being part of the EU. So just to summarise, on the rules and regulations, particularly on health and safety, in the UK we are seen as probably one of the leading lights in Europe on health and safety legislation, and what we do tends to be followed by the rest of Europe. So it's probably unlikely that there's going to be any dramatic change on health and safety. As far as the design standards go, over the last, 15, 20 years, we have introduced and adopted a lot of the Euro codes for design standards. And I think it's also fairly unlikely that we're suddenly going to ditch those and reintroduce British design standards. Most of design is now, across most of Europe at least, is pretty standard in terms of the guidance and rules that you have to follow. So it's again quite unlikely that we're suddenly going to ditch the Euro codes and the Euro standards in favour of some alternative UK codes. Going on to import and export, it's estimated that 2/3 of construction materials are imported from the EU. Now, this is either direct imports or raw materials that get turned into manufactured goods. The raw materials are imported from the UK, from Europe, and then turned into manufactured goods used in construction by UK manufacturers. And there are really two issues here. First of all, there's the issue around the pound. At the moment, it's envisaged that the pound will become weaker when we exit from the EU, which will lead to rising costs of imported materials. And secondly, if we lose tariff-free access, we could face the imposition of duties and limits on quantities. There could also be, in the initial instance, because there is confusion about what is happening, we could have delays happening at ports, both for import and for export of materials. And there's been some news in the press recently about the Border Force looking at what impact that might have. And the third one is the workforce. The availability of labour is one of the biggest issues, I think, that's facing the construction industry. We're already seeing the number of EU workers in the construction sector fall. And this is since the EU referendum and up to the end of 2017, there was a 1% reduction in the number of EU workers in the construction sector. And I'm not aware that that has increased significantly since then. Just to give you some facts and figures, in the construction of building sector, there's a total workforce in the UK of about 800,000, of whom 110,000 are from the EU. In London, that goes up dramatically to 40% of the workforce are from the EU. And as Craig mentioned, there is going to be some kind of visa system introduced. And a lot of this, the EU workforce is semi-skilled or low-skilled, and is likely to be a target of the visa restrictions. So it's quite likely that the numbers of EU construction workers will reduce over time. One of the other impacts, and this is already happening quite significantly, is the rising demographics, which is leading to a skill shortage. And some interesting statistics that I came across quite recently. In the southeast, 52% of the construction workforce is aged between 45 and 64. So that's quite a high proportion of the workforce, which will gradually, over time, retire and leave a gap in the skills in the construction sector. And I know that there are a number of UK companies who are acutely aware of this and are reintroducing apprenticeships, but the numbers of school leavers going into apprenticeships isn't matching the reduction in the workforce due to the demographics. And that demographics also applies to EU construction workers. That those are the EU construction workers that have been in this country for a number of years are obviously getting much older, and they're not being replaced by younger workers coming in to the country to replace them. There is a move that these younger workers are looking for work in other EU countries like Germany and France and Italy, where they know that they won't have visa issues. So, having said that, the picture is quite mixed. It's not all doom and gloom. And particularly in the construction sector, the industry is still going through quite a boom period. So issues like importing materials and the workforce should be very much in the forefront of contractors looking at how they're going to deal with this. And that, I think, brings us on to the next slide, which I'm going to hand back to Craig.
Thank you, Mark. So we'll go on to the next slide, and because I'd like to sort of start to think about how do we start to address these things, because again, as Mark pointed out, this is not all doom and gloom. It's not all negative. There are a lot of opportunities out here, but underlying all of it is change to the industry and change to organizations specifically, and people within the organizations. So what is it that we can do to get ready and identify some of these opportunities and take advantage of them? Well, one of the things that I want to take you through quickly now before we wrap up the session is the readiness assessment that we've prepared and we've been working with a couple of clients with. And what this allows us to do is or any organization, is to very, very quickly identify the specific parts of the business that are impacted by this change or by Brexit. And then allow us to highlight the priority areas, because like any sort of improvement initiative, there's going to be a lot of things that we can find that we could fix, but we might not have the resources available to fix everything that we find. So how do we go about prioritizing some of those things that we find, and what do we do with them? And then ultimately identifying additional improvement opportunities. So we might come into this exercise looking specifically at Brexit and the impact of Brexit, but what else might we find? And the approach really allows you to unpack or open up your organization and identify what those things are. And again, if we just go back to the construction industry briefly, Mark, I wonder if you could talk through some of these potential opportunities that are out there for the industry.
Yeah, this is an area that I've been dealing with quite a bit over the last 15 years in particular, looking at increasing productivity within the industry, helping companies to identify where they can increase productivity. And that could include things like BIM, which is on obviously the design and procurement side. BIM is a huge opportunity for the industry, but it's not something that you can buy a BIM package and overnight it's suddenly going to turn your business around. It is a long-term opportunity for the industry to become more efficient, but it will take time, will take resources, and that will also cost money. But the long-term benefits are clearly there. It's not a quick fix, but it is it's one with huge potential. And I know that an awful lot of companies in the industry are actively looking at introducing BIM with their design teams. Another one is lean construction. Is the way that you're building at the moment the most efficient? Are you making best use of the resources that you've got, particularly in terms of on-site construction? And that leads on to the next one, is off-site construction, prefabrication. And again, I know that there are a number of the big construction companies are actively looking at this, and they are constructing prefabrication factories where they will be able to prefabricate in controlled conditions components of a building, so that on site it becomes an assembly job rather than a manufacturing process. But that also leads to other issues, and one of those is tolerances. When you start introducing prefabricated components, tolerances suddenly become a real issue, because you don't have the tolerances on site, even in house building, that will enable you to easily fit prefabricated components when you've been used to making these and building these on site, where every pipe, cable or fitting is cut to the length required rather than cut to a preset length. And the other one is greater collaboration. Collaboration is one of the areas that's I'm very keen on. Having worked for a number of years with companies like Stanhope Properties, they saw the benefits of collaboration in the 90s and introduced this with their partners, worked very closely with their partners, and used their partners, subcontractors and suppliers and design teams to help them improve productivity by looking at prefabrication, off-site construction, and lean construction. And the benefits that they got out of it were absolutely huge. So those are just some of the areas that I think companies ought to be looking at. The best way to do that is through a good understanding of what you do and how you do it, and who does it, and working closely with suppliers and subcontractors to make the best use of the resources that you and they have.
Excellent. Well, that makes a nice step through into the next section. So thank you very much, Mark. So as Mark was describing there, a key to this is it really about understanding what you do and who does it, and how all those different pieces of your organization actually integrate and work together. And so this is really the foundation of the Brexit readiness approach, is first of all establishing a common language by creating a single model of your people, processes, data, technology, resources, and any other things that are important to running your business. So this is really the sort of foundational building block of what we do with Skore. We build this model up by starting to look at those key components of the organization. And then we break them down into smaller and smaller digestible chunks, if you like. So we're creating a multi-layer view of the organization, a view that can be looked at from lots of different points of view, from different levels within the organization, to really be able to understand how this all works and how it all hangs together, and what are the interactions between teams and between people. And when Mark talked about the importance of collaboration there, for collaboration to be really effective, we need to establish a set of rules or a common understanding of how things work. And by putting together or establishing this common language and collaborating to create that view, you can very, very quickly reach that level where different teams can communicate and collaborate much more effectively. And that's really the essential first step to really understanding where about in the business are we going to see some sort of impact or potential impact. So moving specifically to the Brexit impact, once we've built that model and started to understand how these pieces work, and of course through doing that we're going to identify potential opportunities that we talked about before, either specific to construction or in whatever business that you're involved in. We can then review the model and look at specific steps within the business and say, what is the impact, or if there is an impact, what is that potential impact to this particular area? So in the example that we have here, we're asking the same simple questions. Is there a regulatory or compliance impact? Does the step rely on imports or exports from the EU? Does the step rely on the movement of workforce to or from the EU? And what we've done here, the questions are based on the survey that we pushed out, but through the follow-up work that we did following the survey, we take the results of those questions and we weight them, so we can start to understand and prioritize the impact on the organization. So the first step of that is we create an instant report within the system that allows us to be able to very, very quickly look at or prioritize the areas to focus on. We can take that information and export that, and we use a business intelligence tool to then create some sort of heat map. And again, this very, very quickly, so it's literally a case of complete the questions against the relevant steps within the model. And then we can, within minutes, we can create a heat map, which can really allow us to focus right down on what are the key areas, what is the highest potential impact area that we need to focus on. Once we've prioritized that work, we can also use that same form that we captured the impact of Brexit against the steps within the organization, or what the organization does. We can also add things like mitigation actions. So what are we going to do to mitigate this or to investigate? And we can apply a status, so we can look at what sort of progress are we making through this, through mitigating some of these actions. So again, either exporting the standard report from the system and putting it into a BI tool, or using our API, you can connect your business intelligence tool that you're already using within your organization. You can connect directly to the Skore platform, so that as you update and change the results of your assessment, you can see those reflected in real time in the BI tool. And so you can start to prioritize the work that needs to be done and track the progress. So in summary, the benefits of doing this sort of assessment is, well, first of all, you can very, very quickly understand the potential impact that Brexit will have on your business and what you need to do about it. And when I say quickly, you very, very quickly, it's in some cases a matter of hours, you can really start to understand and put your finger on where you need to focus your efforts. But at the same time, you're identifying additional improvements. Mark gave us an overview of some of the key potential improvements and opportunities that can be identified in the construction industry today. But by collaborating and working together as a team to create that common language, you will uncover lots of hidden inefficiencies that you'd never seen before within the organization or not been able to articulate, but other innovative ideas that the team will come up with through going through that exercise. And this is all in addition to simply trying to assess the impact of an event such as Brexit on the business. And ultimately what that does is it gets everybody on the same page. And I talked about the sort of rules around collaboration, how that can really facilitate collaboration. So given the benefits of completing the assessment, so what would you do next? How would you take advantage of this? Well, what you can do is get in contact with us for a free initial consultation. We can also offer a free trial on the system. If you're already using Skore, then feel free to get in contact with us, and we will set up the Brexit assessment tool for your workspace so you can start to do the analysis and capture the information. The contact details are on the screen. So thank you again, Mark. Thank you very much, everybody, for attending. And if you'd like to know anything else, then please do get in contact. And thank you.